Call the meeting to order at 6:59. Roll call. Connie Tripp. Here. Mr. Hudson.
Here.
Sue.
Yes.
Tamara.
Here.
Giovanna.
Yeah.
Jim.
Here.
And I am here. We have a quorum. Would you stand with me for the pledge of allegiance? I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda.
So.
Second.
Thank you, Monty. All in favor? Everyone? I believe we have some invited guests this evening, some recognitions.
Yes, we do. We would like to welcome some people to our board meeting tonight. If you remember earlier in the school year, we did recognize our first female wrestler to record a victory in Oak Grove history. Oak Grove's got a long, outstanding past of wrestling success. So we would like to, at this time, recognize Lauren Phillips, the first female wrestler to record a victory in Oak Grove history. Since that time, from my understanding, she actually was the MRVC West champion at 120 pounds, correct?
All right.
Along with that, her father, Mike Phillips, and mother, Holly Phillips, are both staff members here in the district. So a great representation of the Oak Grove family. So thank you to the entire family. I also wanted to take just a moment, of course they're not all here, just our elementary staff, our custodial staff, our ECC staff. They, in a matter of a week, moved our entire ECC wing out of this current building over to our new addition at the primary. And the 5th grade elementary moved all of their things up here to this wing. So massive accomplishment, couldn't have done it without any one of them. So I just wanted to publicly thank the elementary staff, custodial staff, and the ECC staff. And I know there's lots of people that I'm not including that, and I apologize for missing them, but that was quite an accomplishment. So I just wanted to recognize all of those people as well. So, and then another group that we have tonight, earlier this year, Coach Evans here. Coach Evans is here. She helped organize a burpee challenge at the middle school. And Coach Evans, you just want to explain that just a little bit, please?
No, and I'm not going to demonstrate. That's okay. That's what I wanted. Actually, it's Lauren, and she, at Fortitude Gym, right uptown here, her and her husband, they spearheaded it, and it was they did a burpee challenge, and then they also did a fundraiser classroom, and they chose my classroom as the fundraiser for the middle school PE classes. And the burpee challenge, I didn't really do that with the middle school kids because I just wasn't real sure, but you could, I could say, Drew, you owe me, I'll pay $20 to have you do 10 burpees. And if he didn't want to do them, he'd have to double that to not do them. That's how the burpee challenge works. So if you don't want to do them, you just have to pay money. But the other Fortitude, you paid $10 and you got to come work out at the gym with us. And we had 4 students that did it. We had Allie Sonker, Callie Carroll. We had Landon Meisenheimer and Tristan, and I don't know Tristan's last name.
Tristan Driscoll.
Yes, it is, yes. Good job. And so they came and worked out with us, and it was really awesome. We did it on a Saturday, and Lauren is on her way, but she had a class until 7, so she'll be here. But she knows exactly how much we raised. I want to say like $2,100, and we bought some equipment to use in the gym for the fitness classes, or for our classes when we do fitness. We got step boxes, we got exercise bands, we got ab mats, we got wall balls, weighted balls, we got slam balls, which are weighted balls. Just some different equipment that the kids can use that they don't normally, they weren't going to get to use that with us. We just couldn't afford that kind of equipment. So it was really awesome.
Fantastic, yes. And along with those 4 students, also recognize Lauren and Blake Weller, who are the owners of
And
Fortitude.
Lauren's on her way.
And when she comes in, we'll make sure to recognize
Okay.
her. Just say thank
Okay.
you to them, but thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, and I to Lauren, this is something that she wants to do every year. So like next year it won't be my class, she'll pick a different class, and I don't think it necessarily has to be a PE class, but I think she wanted to start with me since I work out there and fitness is kind of her thing. So, but yes, very nice, very good. Glad to be a part of it.
And then lastly, I did want to thank our families for their support and understanding. We did close school on Thursday and Friday just due to our high illness rate along with cold wind chills. That's never easy. It's never a decision that we take lightly. Our families have been very flexible and understanding, especially in the past 2 years, so I just want to say thank you to them. And just kind of piggyback off that, our attendance today was up slightly, right at 91% of COVID cases. We currently have 26 positives within the district. That is down from last week. We hit an all-time high of 43 last week right as we closed. But a big difference that it has made is we only had 12 staff out today. And I do want to also thank our staff. They have continued to come to school in very difficult times. They've had to put their own personal things on the sidelines so they can continue to come to school and serve our kids. So just kind of a quick COVID update. So a lot of people have gone out of the way to support the school and support our kids. And I say thank you for that as well.
Thank you guys for being here. You're welcome to stay. Don't feel like you have to, though. I'm sure that's out of your. We now have a presentation from LJ Hart.
Thank you. I'm Tom Pizarkowitz. This is Wesley Townsend. He's been here before, retired superintendent from Pleasant Hill. Tonight, what we're going to do is talk about the remaining sale of your $2.5 million bonds. Recall back in June of 2020, voter approval for 22.5. In order for the bonds to be bank qualified, we sold $10 million in 2020, $10 million in 2021, and now the remaining 2.5. Now, we don't have investors lined up just yet. What we're proposing tonight is what is called a parameters resolution. Once we get the rating in place, investors lined up, this would authorize the superintendent, board president, and Larry Hart to lock in the financing as long as we're within the parameters. And this is an effort to help expedite the process to get you your money as soon as possible. And we've been held up slightly with the state treasurer and the direct deposit program getting, historically we would get a AA+ rating on the bonds. Now we have to go out and get your own underlying rating, essentially your own credit score as a standalone entity. We had a conference call this afternoon. Mr. Huffington did a great job on the phone call with S&P. They evaluate your financials, look at the overall management of the district, and we should hear back from them probably middle of next week. Now, we also talked about the lease financing as well, and I'll get into that on the tail end of this presentation. Okay. So as I go through this, if you have any questions, please interrupt me.
Can I ask you just as
Sure.
since I haven't been through any of the bond presentations previously, did we go through that before with the other sales of having to get our own rating?
No, you did not. So with the state program, the AA+, it came at no cost, and you piggyback essentially off the state.
Okay.
So now now you have to essentially, unless you sign off saying you'll abide by the Attorney General's directive regarding mask mandates and quarantine, which is essentially an illegal document.
Mm-hmm.
So most districts are now going the route of getting their underlying rating.
Okay, so this has to deal with what the Attorney General is currently doing around schools as the
Yes.
change. Okay.
Well, I guess the treasurer is the one that's really impacting this, I assume at the directive of the Attorney General,
Okay.
but
Thank you. I
You're
appreciate
Playing
that.
politics with the budget.
yes. So on the first page, if you want to take off the black clip, might be a little bit easier. The paperclip documents, the first one labeled Schedule 6. This is the proposed repayment plan for the $2.5 million. It's really short. It's due in 2024. because the bonds we already sold are on the back end. And we sold those first because they're the most susceptible to interest rate movement. We want to lock in those rates first. And so this front piece, like I said, will mature in 2024. We're thinking it's going to need, well, to try to maximize some of the premium, more money you get up front, a 4% coupon. The other ones we sold at a 5% coupon. If you look under yield statistics, the row labeled bond yield for arbitrage purposes, 0.75. So what that means is, even though we have a 4% coupon on these bonds, the actual rate, because the investor's going to pay you more money up front to get that 4%, so their effective rate of return when you factor in that premium is 0.75. And explain that a bit further on the next page.
We recognize the 42 members real quick before they're here.
I'm also really sorry, I did not, I would have just left.
I'm the one that made her come in, I'm sorry.
I've shown up.
I'll introduce, we got
please
Blake
introduce.
and Lauren Weller, and they are the owners of the gym, and this is Landon Meisenheimer. He was also one of the students that participated in it, so it's really kind of cool.
Thank you so much for your support. For
Yeah,
this
thanks for having us.
All right, sorry. Thank you, sorry.
I wouldn't want to punish them. Listen tonight. Okay, on the second page, the pricing summary report, reading left to right. So again, it's a 4% coupon to yield 0.75, $2.5 million. The investor's going to pay the price of 106.563. So on the far right-hand side, sell $2.5 million of bonds, they would pay $2,664,075. So that reoffering premium of $164,000 comes into the district to cover the cost of issuance and to be used towards the project. And again, this is an estimate of what, if we can get better, I'm certainly going to try to do that, which ultimately means you get more money for your project. On page 3, looking at the 3 series of bonds, so in the light blue shaded column was what we sold in 2020. That produced a reoffering premium of $1.8 million. And under uses of funds, deposit to the construction fund was $11,674,419. The yellow shaded column is what we sold in 2021. That produced a premium of almost $1.7 million. In your construction fund, we deposit $11,526,000. And so on this issue, as I mentioned, we think $164,000 of premium to produce $2,611,125. Now the total cost of issuance, I'll go through each of those. The bond counsel fees at $5,500. The official statement, that's a prospectus that goes to the investors, at $2,500. Registrar paying agent, UMB Bank, $400 setup fee, an annual fee of $300. That's the only reoccurring fee. Our underwriting fees at $27,500. Underwriting expenses, the traded bonds in the market, $3,300. And then the rating agency fee, that's a new one, the $12,750. And then to register with the state auditor, $1,000, for a total of $52,950. And then on the column on the far right-hand side, in the middle of the page, you can see deposit to the construction fund total. It's going to be right around or just over $25.8 million.
So just looking at these, is the reason that the estimated reoffering premium is less than, because we're asking for a quarter, and that's definitely less than a quarter of what it was before. Is it because of the amount, or is it because of the way that we're having to go through the rating agency?
That's a good question. So yeah, it's more of a function of we're selling less bonds, you're not going to get as much premium.
Right.
Also the maturity of the bonds. This is very short piece, matures in 24, where the other ones, they go out to 2035.
Okay.
So they were
It's a longer
15-year
duration.
financing, yes. You're
And this
gonna
is 2 years.
produce more money, more
Okay.
premium on a longer financing. I don't think, so I'm hoping the district comes in A- or better, which is investment grade. If I was selling a longer financing, the difference between A- and AA+, yes, you would notice a difference in yield. You would get less premium. But the fact that this is so short, I don't think it's gonna hurt much. You'll notice.
Right.
much.
I was just kind of trying to get a sense in my mind of what the treasurer's directive impact is having on a district as far as cost. So the cost is really the 12,750.
Yeah, we can quantify that.
But it's not necessarily, you're not seeing it it's not a $200,000 difference, but it could be a little bit depending on the rating that we get.
Exactly.
Okay.
On average, I'm telling most districts, it costs you maybe probably worst case scenario, 0.25%, but not necessarily in your case. If it was a 10 to 15 year financing, I would say about 0.25%.
And this is a 2-year and the others were?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And when we get a rating, like how long is that good for, and like the rating fee, like is that something before another bond issue comes up? Is that something, if we're in a better position, that you would try to get us re-rated, or do you just keep that?
They charge a fee every time you do a financing. And so the rating on this particular one essentially goes away when the bonds are paid off. But yeah, so even with the lease financing, so I plan on coming back next month to discuss that, but that's a completely separate rating fee, and I have that.
And is the fee based on the amount, or is it's a, so?
Yes.
So if we would have had to
Ranges.
pay the fee on the 10 million, it would have been higher?
It would have been higher, yes.
Okay, thank you.
This is all because we have to do the self-rating instead of the state actually rating us.
You don't have to, it's a choice, right?
Yeah, it is a choice, but it's,
I get
yeah,
it.
yeah.
No, I get it.
Yeah, right.
But what I'm trying to do in my mind, as I'm thinking of bigger picture, so we're one school district that's impacting 12,750, but if it was when we did the first rating in 2021, it could have been a bigger impact.
Oh,
That's
absolutely.
one. If we have 10 school districts that have a $50 hit, that's 500,000. If we have 20, that's what I'm trying to get in my
Sure.
mind, because it's bigger. I mean, it's impacting us, but it's a bigger issue in the state that needs to be addressed.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
A district not too far from here. It's really impacting the refinancing bond issues that we're doing. I had some locked up in December, a couple $100,000 of savings, and now rates have gone up. The cost of doing this, it's cost.
Right.
100,000 here, 100,000 there.
Yeah, all the legislative agendas that I've seen when it comes to schools have, nobody is talking about the impact of the treasurer's notice. And so that's just, I think, something that I just am trying to wrap my head around to truly calculate the cost.
Yeah, it's significant. On the legal size document, corner here. This is the cash flow analysis in the debt service fund, reading left to right. We have your assessed valuation, and we're growing, just to be conservative, we're growing that at 1% annually. The green shaded columns represent the levy and the debt service fund, or the revenue, I should say. So I know you have $1.86 this year. Just to be conservative, I'm assuming you go back to $1.71 if we're able to push some of those pennies back over into operating. That might be something you want to do going down the road. We'll just see how the formula works out this year, tax rate setting process. We have revenue from your state assessed railroad and utility of $172,000, keeping that constant. Some other sources, M&M surtax and lieu of tax, financial institution, $26,184. Some interest earnings in the debt service fund, assuming, and it's a little aggressive now, 1%. Hopefully it'll come back. In the dark green column in the middle is our total revenue, and then the pink or pink shaded columns, we have the payments on your bonds. So on the far right hand side are the total fiscal year payments, and that blue shaded column is the balance in your debt service account. So if we just focus on those two columns on the far right-hand side, and then I blew those up on the next page so we can see them better. If I look at you ended last year with just over 2.6 million in debt service. I'm projecting with that $1.86 levy that you end up just over almost 4.1 million. So your payments are above next year's, your balances are above next year's payments before the revenue even comes in. So you're in a really, really strong position. In fact, I anticipate this summer, you might be able, your 2016 bonds are callable, around close to 900,000. That's callable. You might be able to just pay them off and save over 100,000 in interest expense. But we'll see how that all, comes through the summer. But looking at how your balances continue to grow above your payments, you are in a position, and I've checked to come back as early as 2024 for our bond issue as large as $10 million without increasing taxes. So that's something to consider. Keep in the back of your mind, especially with a lease financing, an idea of maybe paying that lease off with a bond issue. Okay. Any questions on that?
The next document is the resolution that needs approval or not to move forward with this $2.5 million issuance of the bonds. I won't go through the entire document, but I'll hit a few key points on it. On the first page in, the resolution, the paragraph with all capital letters that kind of summarize the entire legal document. It basically authorizing the issuance of the $2.5 million principals of the Series 2022As for the purpose of, and it's exact ballot language that was on your ballot a couple years ago for the safety and security, technology, renovations, classroom additions, roofs, HVAC, etc. So give you just a second to read through that. The next section I want to point out is on page 4, section 2.2, which is a description of the bonds. And towards the bottom of that paragraph, you notice there's some blanks there in the rate and the yield. Again, we're establishing the parameters tonight, and so you can see that the parameters on that very last sentence show as long as we get the bond sold and the bond yield for arbitrage does not exceed that 1%, then the final terms committee can move forward with closing the deal and everything, and we'll go over that in just a minute too.
As I mentioned in my numbers, I had 0.75, but I'm saying at least have some wiggle room. As long as the bond yield doesn't go above 1%, the final terms committee can still lock in this financing. But certainly at any point, if you're not comfortable with it, we just bring it back to the whole board for approval.
So say that again, is that the numbers you're saying, or is that just?
Yeah, so that table towards the bottom, a few lines up from the table. Such interest rates shall be consistent with interest rates generally established for general obligation bonds bearing a rating of A- or better from S&P Global's public finance rating on the date of determination by the final terms committee, and shall not exceed a bond yield for arbitrage purposes of 1% per annum. So I don't think it'll be 1%, but that gives us flexibility if rates jump up on us within the next couple weeks. And they have been trending up, there's no doubt about that.
On page 24, section 11.5 stipulates that these are qualified as tax-exempt bond obligations. And then the section 11.6 right below there is the district's continuing disclosure requirements and what has to be furnished to MSRB each year, and that's something our company assists with as much as necessary. And the final section is on page 27, and it is section 11.9, and this is where it describes the establishment of that final terms committee we've mentioned. So basically, this section, it appoints the superintendent, the president of the board, and Mr. Hart to be the final terms committee, and if the bonds meet the parameters we've discussed, then they can move forward with the closing. And like Tom said, if it doesn't meet those parameters, then it must come back before the entire board, so. Any questions on anything in this document?
I have a lot of questions, but no, I really don't have questions. I always get nervous when I have a big packet put in front of me that I haven't had a chance to look at. And I know it's standard language, and I appreciate you putting forward those pieces, but I think the hard part for me is just not seeing the packet in totality to look at it. And I know I'm not the one physically signing it, but I am.
Any other questions?
So we can vote on that, and then I can get into the lease financing, however you want to handle it.
Should we move them? I think it's motioned together.
I think we've got them all together as one. Yep. So, go ahead.
Okay, so with the lease, as I mentioned, my plan is really to come back in your February meeting, because it requires, since a lease does not require voter approval, it does require you to post a notice in the paper. And that's what I have after the resolution. It needs to be published twice in separate weeks, and the second publication has to be at least 7 days prior to the meeting. So that's why the bond resolution doesn't include the lease, because we haven't met all those requirements yet.
So then for the lease agreement, will we get information ahead of the meeting to be able to
Yes,
look at?
yes. So my plan is, since we will have the rating in place, we'll have all the investors lined up with final rates, a full-blown resolution.
Okay.
That can be part of your board packet before we show up. So on Schedule 7, this is an idea of what a $4 million lease would look like over 15 years. And I deliberately delayed principal for 2 years, so you would start in 2025. And we would make them callable in 2 years, in 2024. So the idea being, so the first 2 years, the principal and interest payments on the far right-hand side, first year $148,000 and then $137,000. That would be, minimal impact to your budget. And then if you're able to run or want to run a bond issue to pay this off, then you're not faced with the nearly $400,000 principal and interest payments thereafter. I think the coupon probably needs to be around 3%, and it's possible. I ran it if it was 4% all the way down, and the payments on the far right-hand side would be about $400,000. But a lot of that ties into what the rating comes out to be. Similar to the bonds, though, these coupons are at a reoffering premium. That's where the market is. That's what the investors are demanding in a rising interest rate environment. So under bond yield for arbitrage purposes, it says 1.36. That's the effective interest rate when you factor in the premium. I'm going to further explain that on page 2. Fourth column from the left-hand side, the yield would range from 1% down to 1.5%. And then under bid information in the middle, for $4 million, the reoffering premium that would come in is $169,266. If you see the third column from the right-hand side, the call date, April 15, 2024. So they all would be callable in 2 years. Now, I could make this a 10-year financing, whatever you want, but I don't want to make it too short because, you know, if you end up having to pay principal, if you don't pay it off with the bond issue, then you're really going to jam yourself up on the operating side, trying to meet your lease payments.
Is it normal for the yield to increase as it matures?
Yes, just tying up your money for a longer period of time, potentially, if you don't call them. So you gotta pay the investor more. So on page 3, up at the top, sources of funds, we would sell 4 million of certificates. Estimated reoffering premium of 169,000 comes in. Under uses of funds, a deposit to the construction fund of 4,066,000 and change. Now with a lease, you don't actually see the proceeds on your books. It goes to a trustee, UMB Bank. So the money's wired to them. You get an invoice, you forward it on to them, and they cut the check. The only thing you're gonna recognize on your books are the principal and interest payments that you pay out of your capital projects fund. It's essentially an off-balance sheet transaction. So with a lease, under cost of issuance, they are harder to sell. Some investors and some banks just don't like them because there's not a set levy tied to the repayment of these. It's not like you have your debt service levy that you absolutely have to repay your bonds, where you have the authority to adjust that levy accordingly. You know, with the lease, we need to make sure you can afford it within your budget, and that's some risk to the investor, so they demand a slightly higher interest rate, and then the cost to actually issue them is more expensive. Special tax counsel, $9,000. We have the prospectus, the official statement of $2,500. The registrar paying agent now is $1,500 and the annual fee of $1,800. The underwriting fees of $72,000. Underwriting expenses, $3,300. And then the rating agency of $14,250. Now I am working with S&P trying to get a reduction since you're doing the bond and the lease at the same time, or potentially the lease. Maybe they'll give us a break. They're just not very receptive. They don't get return phone calls. Yeah, right. So there might be a reduction there. I'm working on it. And then to record the legal documents, $500. On that last page, this is the cash flow analysis in the capital projects fund. So reading left to right, you don't have a capital projects levy and there's no state assess. So essentially what it comes down to is the amount of revenue you transfer from your incidental fund to the capital projects. It can be in the form of classroom trust fund money or the 7% allowable transfer. Now, under footnote 5 and 6, you had almost $800,000 of classroom trust, and you can transfer $860,000 of the 7%. So there's more than enough money to transfer. It's just what's being used up over in the incidental fund already. But you know, again, to give you an idea, you have $150,000 for 2 years, and then about $400,000 thereafter if you keep the lease in place. And on the far right-hand side is just surplus funds, revenue minus expenses, and surplus.
So if some of it, if the 7% transfer is based on weighted ADA, how could, so is there a potential that then the attendance or could impact then what can be transferred?
It's calculated every year by DESI, yes, so it does change.
Right.
But like I say, that's not even close to the amount you're gonna need, so it would never go below that 400.
Okay.
Plus you have your classroom trust fund available too, so.
And there's always the ability to put some levy into capital projects if you choose to
Right.
do so.
So the word lease within this situation is that you're borrowing to issue a bond, is that what it is? Or because the bond is, can you just help me with that word?
Sure. So a bond is approved by the taxpayers, paid for by ad valorem tax. If the school district was to, let's say, go away, all right, the taxpayers are still on the hook. They're going to, you still repay the bonds through taxes. Where a lease, the board is committing to a financing. Now, legally, you cannot commit future boards to a long-term financing. So the documents are set up where they renew each year. You can walk away from a lease, say next year, we don't care about it. We're not gonna make our payments. Well, it's harder. You can't really do that because we do encumber your property. And so the investors essentially step in and say, okay, well, our lease covers the elementary renovations. We own the elementary school. So either the trustee will liquidate it and, try to make the investor whole. Now, as a practical standpoint, that's never happened. We've never had to go through that. Where the risk is if a school district consolidates with another and they don't need the building, so they just walk away. I don't know if that completely answers your
No, I
question.
know it helps because, one, it's two different mechanisms of bringing the funds into the district. And I think the word lease is interesting because you always think about it as a tangible piece, but I guess it truly is then a tangible piece.
You are essentially, while the lease is outstanding, you're renting it, your semi-annual payments to the investors, essentially your rent to utilize that facility. And then once it's paid off, the encumbrances go away and the ownership reverts back to you.
Right. And so what you're
Like a
saying is,
title loan.
right. Well, and what you're saying is that even though you're looking at it as a 15-year, there's the potential for the district because of, in 2 years, there may be the opportunity that it could be that it's paid sooner than that.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
And it's a very common form of borrowing. Some districts just can't get voter approval for a bond issue.
Sure.
So somewhere along the line, so this was developed. I don't want to say as a workaround, but
Another
as a
option.
means, yes.
Thank you for that, Tony.
And then last but not least, we have a copy of our underwriting agreement for the lease financing. Very similar to our agreement with the bond issue. This is more for regulatory purposes. We have to disclose we serve as the underwriter. We do not have a fiduciary interest because we're the middleman between the school district and the investor, and our fee is based upon the size of the financing and a successful closing. If we don't close on it, we don't get paid. So certainly in our best interest to follow through. But that within itself is an inherent conflict of interest that I have to disclose. And on the last page is the cost of issuance. It lines up with what we already went through.
And this agreement is for this issue only too. I think that's probably good to point out that to one issue only, and once the lease purchase is done, then no more commitments.
Basically, the sooner the better, because rates are going up, right?
They are trending up. I read articles all the time, and the The real treasury rate, they're saying is trading in negative territory because they expect things to settle down. Now, I'm not gonna be on a record of making any predictions. All I can tell you is they have been trending up over the past several weeks.
Any other questions?
I appreciate your explanations to help me wrap my brain around.
Oh, you're welcome.
So just so Jamon and I joined in April, so we're new to the story here. So district runs bond for $22,500,000. Right now, that current project has escalated way over that $22.5 million. So this lease is what's going to cover the difference to cover what's owed to finish our project.
Yes.
Correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. My question, I guess, and maybe the board answers this better than we do. On the 22.5, my understanding is that a probable business practice for school districts is to try to keep your bond premiums as a buffer. Why was that so much different for this project with Hollis and Miller and LJ Hart? Do we know that reason, or is that just a, because when we run, I'm just trying to think for future
Sure.
bonds.
Sure.
You know, if we run a 22.5 million bond, my understanding is that districts keep that premium as kind of like cost, contingency funds, that type of thing, whenever you have, you know, part materials go up. But obviously for us, you know, we are way overboard here now because now we're coming and doing a $4 million bond. I'm sorry, lease. I mean, and the hard part is like what you just mentioned is, you know, we're gonna run a bond to pay a bond.
Sure.
That is that normal? I've never heard of a community doing that. Is that heard of other places or?
Yes, because in your particular case, you're restricted, well, all school districts, your legal limit for a bond issue is 15% of your assessed valuation. So the 22.5, we were at your ceiling.
That was it.
Yeah, you couldn't go above it. So, and that's why I'm saying, we've been very aggressive with repaying your bonds to try to get that capacity back up.
And then
transfer it all back over into debt service, pay the lease off.
Gotcha.
And that is common. More so, I see it a lot up in northwest Missouri, but it's.
I mean, that's the thing of the bond campaign of, hey, we're running our bond to pay a bond, and
Right.
because you're not really getting anything for it, and that's what obviously the public sees the
But
new buildings or.
When you get to that point, you'll be freeing up operating money. So that'd be part of what your
True.
new bond issue would be doing.
Yeah, and you
That's
said
where
we
your
would be
operating budget.
potentially at that 10 million, so there would be a potential 5.5 million spread.
Depending on what your needs are, what
Yeah.
your facility needs are.
But the reason it happens, inflation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what cost us the extra money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing though, with the inflation, that's where that bond premium comes into play so much. And that, obviously, our inflation went way higher than what the bond premiums are. I mean, that's something that, I guess just in this project, that our premiums weren't our buffer at all. I mean, it blew it out of the water,
When
so.
have you ever heard of inflation going up as high as it has in the last year?
No, that's true, yeah.
So, I mean, that's the answer.
Yep.
Any other questions? Entertain a motion to approve the presentation and the necessary documentation as presented.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other comments? All in favor? It's everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See, they all left too early too, like those Chiefs fans, and didn't hear the good stuff about bonds and leases. I find it fascinating.
Lesson learned. There you go.
Arbitrage.
Now we know the difference.
Thank you, Keith.
That one thing needs to be posted, right? 2
Yes,
weeks.
I'll send it to you electronically, and we'll arrange to make sure it gets posted. Thank you.
All right, we have the presentation on the budget revision by Michelle Ryan. Michelle.
All right, Our second quarter budget revision, that starts on page 20. And I'd like to thank Shelley Ryan. She really put in lots of hours on this. Her and Mr. Harvey both did. Mr. Harvey's out, wasn't able to be here this evening. So I'm just gonna hit a few highlights, but as far as the details, Ms. Ryan will be able to answer those for you much better than I. Starts on page 20, there's just kind of a quick overview. We did experience some additional revenue. At the top of page 21, you'll see a line item for those. The largest of which was the sale of the land. We had not budgeted that. We weren't quite sure on the number on that, so we did not include it in our original budget. And also the early childhood special education state payments from 2021 school year. So at the top of page 21, you'll see some additional revenues, but those were the larger pieces of that revenue. Underneath that, you'll see some adjustments to expenses. And as you're looking at that, probably the first thing that pops out at you on those line items are numbers that are in black and red. The numbers in black, that is an additional expenditure. So that was not in our original budget. The red numbers are actually deductions from our original budget. And there was a lot of just straightening up codes, getting things in the right places. The biggest of which is the very first expenditure on there, which is the building bond in 2020. For simplification, we had not included that in our original budget in June, and you'll see that represented here. So Shelley, if you'd like, why don't you go ahead and continue down through some of those line items, and I'll let you tackle it.
Yes, I tried to color code them so that they would link together, so all your bonds there are in orange, and like he said, we were just establishing the budgets with this that we weren't able to do with our original budget due to time. The next group in the green on the next page are our Sr2 expenses. We have received all of that revenue and we have expended all of that. So those are just all of the changes. Once we had expended all that, I just moved the original budget expense from the original code to the Sr2 code. So some of those numbers in the black and the red you'll see are kind of an in and out. They're exactly the same, and that's why we're just moving that expense from the original code to the new established code linked to Sr2. The next page is your blue items that are tied to your title budget. They had a revision in October, November we worked on that. The same thing with the gray that's following that. Both of those, the SPED and the title, special education, they have to do what's called a final expenditure report. And so we do that this year to look back to last year. Both of those budgets had carryover funds. So we did revisions in both of those budgets in order to allocate those carryover funds for expenditures for this year. So there was about a little over $100 and something thousand carryover money that we got to use this year from last year's budgets. And SPED, if you look, special education in gray had quite a few pages and additions to their budget. I worked closely with Nicole Henderson to make sure as we were doing her revision, we also actually had accurate working budget numbers, because there were a few places in last year's budget that we weren't quite accurate. So that's got a bit more to it. You'll also see right underneath the gray, the $100,000 board-approved transportation wages that you guys approved. I believe it was in September. So that's in there. And then the next bluish, whatever greenish color that is, those were longevity expenses. Those are payouts that we do to our classified staff for their longevity time in the district. This was basically a cleanup. Those payments were actually, I don't want to call them hidden, but they were being paid within the salary code of that staff member. And so it was really hard to budget. It wasn't being accurately recorded in the budget each year to know what those payments were. So what I did was just created a project that pulls those out. It's almost the identical payroll code, but it's a project that brings those out separately. So we'll be able to know that from year to year now, what those payments are as they as they potentially increase. So that's a separate kind of a new coding structure that we implemented. And on the last page, those are again just a few new codes, new budget codes, kind of clarifying things, bringing these into a more specific, like Mr. Harvey called it we're going to better define things. And so that's what a lot of those are, is just better defining them with our payroll structure, our accounting structure. So, any questions with any of those?
Well, I just want to make a comment. You know, I know journal entry is not the most fun thing to go back and redo your entries.
No.
But I could just say the difference between looking at this document and the original budget document are night and day as far as being able to get an eye on what are the grouped expenses. And that's gonna serve so well in a variety of ways. One is, which is what you said around accounting for the actuals to budget. And the second is when the auditors come in, being able to find, and then there is actually a third, when we're starting to build the budget for the next year, to have those defined line items, to be able to group them to make better decisions. So I applaud you, and I know Mr. Harvey and Mr. Huffington for taking the time to go through and do that, because my accounting staff, when I ask for journal entries to move things between different buckets, I get a lot of, ugh.
Yes.
So
It's very time consuming, it's very detailed, but that was our ultimate goal, was to make sure that our coding structure was accurately reflecting what it was. We had several line items that were, for example, the high school instructional staff code. It had what I would consider hidden items. We were paying extra duty gates out of that code. We were paying coaching and sponsors out of that code, which are technically not instruction either. So the goal was to bring those items out, put them in their right place, the right coding structure, so that you truly know how much you're spending in instructional high school staff. So we may have a few more, but I think we're getting a little bit closer.
No, I think it's huge, and I think that as we're looking at the fiscal stability of the district, it's gonna be important that we're able to look at building level. And I would think for principals to be able to look at it, sort of, I look at it as a tree and you have all these branches. So you have your primary code as your, so the trunk of the tree, and then you have all these branches. And every once in a while, you have to put a new bud on there because there's a different expense, like ESSER dollars.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
So the real difference, when you say the budget went up basically 10 million, but 9 million of it is because.
Was it 9.8?
9.8.
Is
So there's
bond.
really only about a $300,000
Yeah.
differential.
Yeah.
And it's just spread out through all the code.
Correct. Correct.
Well, one big piece of that was the allocation to try and get more drivers and get our buses covered, so that allocation of $100,000, that's in there, things like that.
And then the carryover funds from the 2 federal programs, that was over 100,000, so.
So we're 6 months into this budget year. Do we have a sense of where we are on spend? Are we trending on target, off target?
I would say we probably are. It's probably a little bit trickier with all this ESSER money. Those are kind of muddying up the water a little bit. It's kind of hard to know, and now we're waiting on ESSER 3 to see if we're gonna get that. So we have actually been paying some people out of ESSER 3, so we're crossing, not a lot of people, but we're crossing our fingers that that comes in, and then we can do some more recoding.
Right.
More journal entries, but yeah, so I think we're doing pretty good.
And you're right, Dr. Ross, a tremendous amount of work right there by Shelley Ryan, Mark Harvey, both put in long hours, have to do all these entries line by line manually, so she's been doing a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley.
Is that it?
Yeah. I'll entertain a motion in a second to approve the budget revision as presented.
So
Thank you, Shelley.
Second. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
You can have.
A motion in a second. Any comments or questions? Okay, all in favor? Thank you, everyone. Phase 2 construction update.
Okay, just kind of a quick update on our timeline. Construction for phase 2, as we mentioned earlier, elementary, the lower hall, 5th grade, has moved up here to the ECC former ECC. That's gonna get us rolling on phase 2, so just wanted to give everyone a kind of a quick calendar update. February 7th, they will begin setting up, just getting prepared to receive materials out in front where the old office was of the elementary. On the 14th, they will actually start with demolition of those old offices on February 14th. We do have significant delays with our materials. Last we heard, our new flooring will be arriving in the district approximately March 21st. Our goal is we are responsible for our own painting in the existing building. Our goal is to have our painters out ahead of flooring. So hopefully that lower hallway is completely painted before March 21st, before they start the flooring. And then the lower hall completion, this is a very tentative date, but April 28th to complete the lower hall for 5th grade to move back down. That date they could probably be done a little bit sooner than that, but we want to make sure we completed all of our map testing. We didn't want any major disruptions, and we want to make sure that that lower hall is completely finished before we move back in. That way, when the teachers move in there, that late in the school year, they will not have to do anything as far as summer cleaning. Once they move back, they'll be done moving. So that's kind of our timeline as of right now. I'd like to thank Mr. Tripp and Mr. McLean. They have really stepped up and helped us with that project and kind of some of our responsibilities. And they put in a tremendous amount of hours just making sure that things are squared away. So I just wanted to thank them also. Would you like to add anything on that, Mr. Tripp?
No, I might just say that we still have punch list items to do on all the buildings, and we're gonna stay after it till they get them done. That's all I can. I know it's frustrating, and I would encourage you to anything that you see and your teachers see now that they're in the rooms, don't hesitate to bring them up.
When does that elementary office area, when does that close down officially?
It's February 7th.
February 7th? What will the access to that gymnasium be for youth basketball?
It'll have to be on the east doors.
Is that what they do that?
And we'll advertise that and we'll get that out.
Gotcha.
But for now, still the front. And we're trying to work out a plan for some restroom access for teams using those gyms, because that restroom's gonna be renovated. But we'll have some sort of restroom access.
Gotcha.
You tell that to the second grader.
Thank you, Tom. Questions? Other questions, comments? Entertained a motion and a second to approve the construction update for phase 2 as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Giovanna. Have a second? Jim? Thank you. Motion and a second. All in favor? That's everyone. To approve the consent agenda items, I'll entertain a motion and a second, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Ron. Thank Sue. Questions or comments? All in favor? That's everyone. Thank you. Now what you've all been waiting for, policy updates.
You undersell it.
Do what?
Policies are fun.
It's exciting, right? Only you should say that.
Person that liked that bond program.
You know, I learned a new thing today, so that, you gotta value that, right? New.
The first policy there you'll find on page 60, policy GCBDA. This covers certified short-term leaves. This really, for the most part, applies to full-time 12-month certified staff members, which honestly there's a handful of them. The previous policy actually had a differentiation between personal days, which every staff member in the district gets, and what's called vacation days, excuse me. And 12-month certified staff employees were entitled up to 20 vacation days. It kind of clouded up how you use those. The pay rates on those were different. and it was an unforeseen expense to the district if a 12-month certified person left at the end of the school year, because those were paid out at a different rate. So in order to protect the district, what I would like to propose for policy GCBDA is to clean that up, take the vacation days completely out, make everything personal days, and for 12-month certified staff, they work a full 260 days a year, so their days look a little bit different, but award them 25 days of professional or personal leave, which is fairly standard. This is for 12-month certified staff members only. They also receive their, that's in total. So instead of 20 vacation and 14 personal, they would actually be reduced by 9 days and receive 25 personal days. So that protects the district from having to pay out sums of money at the end of the year that they didn't anticipate. One other caveat to that is on the second page, on page 61, this policy lists out official holidays that the board has awarded. There's 10 of those days in there. You can see those listed underneath holidays. Typical holidays include, I would like to add a couple of days in there because those staff members are reduced by 9 full days. I would like to add one day around. It says any day, but it should be one day. The ones I like to add, so it has New Year's Day, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, President's Day. An addition would be one school day when school is not in session. Traditionally around Easter, we have 1 or 2 days off just as kind of a short spring break. I'd like to add one of those days. It says any, but not any, just one. That would be an addition. Memorial Day's in there, Independence, Labor Day. The Friday school is not in session after parent-teacher conferences. Traditionally, teachers and administrators work in the evening for parent-teacher conferences, so we're out of school on that Friday. That would be an additional day for 12-month certified staff. The day before Thanksgiving or Wednesday, school is not in session on that day. Traditionally, staff members travel on that day. And the other addition, the fourth one, would be the very last one, New Year's Eve. So we're reducing their personal days by 9 total. We'd like to add 4 holidays in there. Just kind of a go-between, but none of those days school is in session. So it encourages 12-month certified staff to be in school when kids are here, but some of those additional holidays put in there, if that makes sense.
So there's still 25 days of leave, and then the additional holidays as well.
Correct.
Yeah, so.
Correct. Where if you're not 12 months, you're off all of those days.
Right.
So from a financial standpoint,
Well, it's always, in fiscally too, having 2 different classifications of a day that a person takes off is difficult as well, because you get into all the coding around payroll.
Seems to be a much cleaner alternative. Any questions, comments? I'll entertain a motion to approve policy GCBDA as presented by Mr. Huffington.
So moved.
Thank you, Bonnie. Have a second? Tammy?
Second, yeah.
Thank you, Tammy. Got a motion and a second. All in favor? That's everyone. Thank you.
second one, this will be, I'll be able to explain it a little simpler. GDBDA, it's the same policy. This is just for classified staff. And this would affect a few more people because classified staff for your 12-month include mostly custodians. You got a couple of secretaries and central office workers that this would affect, but they have the same policy. They actually had a tiered system for vacation days with years of service. They got different numbers of vacation days, but once again, simplify it, keep it simple, and include those same days. So for 12 months, it'd be the 25 days with the 4 additional holidays. That's the only change. It's just classified staff, where the first one was strictly certified.
Say that one more time, bottom line, and what the change is?
We've eliminated vacation days completely.
Made it personal.
And we just made everything personal days for every member in the district. There is no such thing as vacation days anymore.
Okay, questions?
And
Like
then,
with the current policy right now, like with the personal day, like what is the justification of that leave? Like, so as a vacation day, I understand, you know, I can take a vacation day for anything I want. But with the personal day right now, if an employee wanted to be off for a personal day, what would the reason have to be? What's the truly the difference when it comes to nothing?
No, the difference was how much it paid out. When you,
That's the cost.
at the end of the year, vacation days were paid annually at the end of the fiscal year, so June 30th. If I'll just use me as an example, if I had any vacation still in the system, I would be paid.
Yeah.
at a
On the
different rate.
classified side, I mean, honestly, this just seems very exuberant to me, cause like, just an example, I only get 10 vacation days, and the rest of it is actually considered sick leave, and like, it is truly only, I'm sick, my family's sick, I'm taking care of a sick child, like, it's not, you don't leave, I mean, cause at 260 days, plus the days that are out holiday, I mean, that just seems 25 days that's a lot of time off of work, and on top of, I don't know, that's just a difference to me of, that's huge in terms of classified staff.
Well, that's really for 12 months. For 11 months, it's 14 days. But we used to have, probably 10 years ago, we had personal days. I think you had 2 personal and 10 sick days. I think might have been what it was. But what we found was people, when we had sick days, people were calling in that morning. We're having difficulty finding substitutes. So they would give us a little more advance notice by everything being just a personal day.
If you're forced to use it as a sick day, then you wanna pretend like it's a sick day and call in the morning. How many 12-month employees would qualify for this?
On the classified side, I would estimate that to be 30. But they were receiving, in the first year, 14 personal days and 10 vacation days, so that's kind of where we rounded that number to,
Yeah.
so. But those were paid out paid at their daily rate,
Right.
vacation rate.
So my question, I guess, why wouldn't we just change the policy of what we pay out for vacation days then?
I think,
That's effectively what we're doing. I mean, we're just
I
renaming
guess.
it and bundling it as one type of day. We're not saying, hey, here's your vacation, you're just cleaning it up, one name, one system.
Yeah.
This is what it is.
yeah,
It does make it cleaner. There's really no point. If they're paid the same, what does it matter whether you have 2 different
I don't know, I mean,
terminologies for them?
so basically what you're saying, if somebody starts as a 12-month classified person, they're gonna get 25 paid days off for a school year.
Correct.
That just seems unbelievable.
If they're a 12-month employee.
So somebody starts off as a custodian, right? So they're gonna get a full 25 days of paid vacation from this forever.
or if you start off as a principal or a nurse.
Well, yeah, I mean,
or a-
that's certified, that's different.
Is it? They're still working 12 months.
Yeah, I
It's a
guess.
different job.
It's salaried versus hourly. There's a difference there, I mean, because everybody that's certified is salary.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're, as a person that's punching a time clock, I mean, I'm just thinking certain types of level
It's
of
the same
work.
amount as what it is now, though. I mean, you're just, instead of saying,
I guess, I guess I'm just used to it being categorized different just because of having the 10 vacation days. That just seems 2 weeks of time off seems standard for a new employee, but I mean, going into a job where now as 25 days, I could be off an entire month of work and get paid for all of it. That just seems crazy on top of all the holidays that are listed. I mean, that's a lot. But
So how many sick days do you get?
like, it's like it's 1 per month basically. So I mean, it adds up, but see, so my sick days are only paid out at $25 a day, but I have to stay in the district for 5 years, whatever it is, so none of the vacation days are ever paid out at a full rate. That's the big difference from district to district. So we've never ran into this because we kind of joke because our vacation days only get paid out at $25 a day. So really for us, we almost force people to take vacation because they're not gonna get to be gone for a full day. Instead of getting paid $25, you'd rather miss a day of work and get paid $25. But I mean, it's obviously, it's a benefit. I mean, it's a recruiting tool, really. I mean, that's something I think we should sell that even more. I mean,
I think it's a benefit that we can give without it being, it's not the best paying positions.
Yeah, I mean, because when you start to look at it, because we're even having this conversation where I work, because we earn different rates of vacation depending on how long you've been there. Well, that's a lot of keeping track for really not a lot of gain, and actually, it's better to just give everybody the rate when you're coming in, rather than sort of mess with, you get 3 hours a pay period, you get 6 hours, you know, it just
Right.
becomes, I think, that tracking piece too. But I think recruitment, number one, trying to get individuals to come in. I think it's also based on approval. So you couldn't, if you said, I wanna take a month off, it's based on approval.
well, true, but I mean, I guess if somebody misses enough time, they're not gonna have a job, but
Right.
that gets hairy too if you have 25 days to take and.
And they accrue though, do they accrue or they end, is it?
They accrue. They do accrue, and
What's the
then
amount you can keep total over time?
there's no limit.
No
That might be
limit.
something to think about.
Yeah.
We had talked about, we actually have had this discussion multiple times. We talked about putting a cap on it, but how do we still encourage employees to come to work? So we had that discussion.
We could still have an accrual rate that's pretty healthy, that then doesn't put liabilities on the books too.
Yep.
Yeah, if you don't take that time off, 100 days pretty fast.
And then you have to work 5 years to get paid out for them if you leave.
That's
Yeah.
correct. And it does, I know for a fact it works for our certified staff. They like to try and save their days.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it does work, and a lot of them, now we've had to change our mentality in the last 2 years, just because, hey, you're sick, you need to stay home. So try and just, but, you know, our teachers, I think it does have an effect on them. Certified staff are paid out at $50 per day, classified staff are paid at $38 a day, so we do differentiate there.
it's not even
It
close.
just- I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it does seem like a lot of days off. Paid days off.
About 30, how many holidays?
14.
Yeah, 39 days.
Well, that's where the number came from, was we looked at what you were getting for vacation and your personal days, and we knew we wanted to reduce that somehow. But even the first year, 12-month was getting 10 vacation and 14 personal. Is where that, so. But we did have the holidays. The thing with the holidays, there's no students in the building. That's what we really, we need them here when it's kids are there.
Any comments or questions? I'll entertain a motion to approve policy GBBDA as presented.
With that one of changing any school day to one.
So moved.
Thank you, Bonnie. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Daniel? Got a motion and a second to approve the policy GBBDA. All in favor? That's everyone.
Thank you. Okay, third one, this is on page 67. This is a new policy. This is on page 67. GIAA also has a GASB. That's a generic policy number of GASB. For us, it'll be policy DIAA. This says, basically addresses fund balances. These are things that we have already been doing. This was caught by our auditors, Westbrook and Company, because we spent, and really the board has you're the end entity to approve this. So we had already been doing this, but we needed to adopt this policy. You'll see in the first heading, actions leading to restricted, committed, and assigned fund balances. And what that does, that just tells us where those funds, how you designate those and where those funds will go. The next section, order of spending. And it just says, for example, when both restricted and unrestricted funds are available for expenditure, restricted funds should be spent first. These are all things that we're already doing. We really just needed to adopt this policy. The second page there, minimum unrestricted fund balances. That's been a topic of concern because we have seen our fund balances really for the last 5 or 6 years. We've slowly been trending downward with our fund balances. So that's something that we've been made aware of. We're trying to correct, I think, with this last budget in June of 2021, we reversed that trend and we'll see our fund balances go back up. So this is really just formalizing that and basically saying that if the board, if fund balances reach critical level, that the board will take action to correct that. And these are all things that we have been doing. And you'll see that in the second to last paragraph. About the fourth line down, it says, undesignated general fund balances may be budgeted at the discretion of the board. So if we have funds in Fund 1, which is our operating fund, you have the right to redistribute those funds as you see fit, which you've already, once again, you've already been doing. We just need to formalize this and adopt this policy. That was brought to us by our auditors.
Did they provide the language?
That they gave us a couple examples, yes. Christy went to great lengths also and consulted MSBA, which is normally where our policies came from. So she did a lot of research. And we took a couple examples and then made it our own.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, sir. Have a second?
Second. Oh, go ahead, Drew.
Drew? Have a motion and a second to approve policy DIAA/GASD 54. Any questions or comments? All in favor? That's everyone.
And the last one there, this is going to be on page 69, policy GCTB. This has to do with employees leaving the district and notification. Really two highlights that I'd like to point out here. And this is also, they're kind of tied together. But on the first page, fourth paragraph down, on page 69, the last sentence, basically when a staff member gives us notice that they are leaving the district at the end of the year, our practice has been, we hold that letter of resignation and it's approved by the board. Our actual policy says that it's actually official once it's accepted, and it could be the superintendent, assistant superintendent, human resources officer. So really my question to the board on that piece is, do we want to continue with current practice of board approval, or is the board comfortable with the central office administrator accepting those? And the reason is we can post those positions sooner if the board's comfortable accepting those by officer in central office. So that's, board policy says it is considered accepted once we receive it, but our practice has been that the board approves it. I don't have a personal preference, but we can post those sooner that way. So that's the first piece of that policy. The second one on page 70 is the early notification of resignation. This we discussed in December, and this is for certified staff. If they give us written notice before the January board meeting with this many years of service, you'll see that they receive an early notification incentive. That really, I think, gives us an opportunity to post jobs sooner and hire quality candidates sooner, because it is extremely competitive. So that's in addition to that policy, that was not in there, so it's a new piece.
So the board still get notification of resignations.
Yes, the board will still get notification. That would come in the monthly board reports that I do. We could also post them in here, but basically, it'll give us the opportunity to post those jobs in advance. They'll still be part of your board packet, and you'll still approve those, but just so we
Give us
can
a head start on that.
get us a head start on hiring. Thank you.
Questions or comments?
It seems to me more efficient and helpful for you. I mean, once an individual has decided to resign, typically that's where it is, and so for it to have to wait for us, I think, is, yeah. But I do think that we need to see the list and the types of positions, just so we can be looking at trends to make sure that.
Make sure, yeah, I wanna make sure we're still made aware of it. Entertain a motion to approve policy GCPB as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Tamara.
I'll second.
Thank you, Sue. Motion and a second. All in favor? That's everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing nothing else on the agenda, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you, Tamara. All in favor? Thank you, everyone, for being here.
February 8th. We're going to do February 2nd.